polymathic practice is you're looking at the issue from all different angles of view, from outside and inside simultaneously. And each of you are coming up with a particular angle or a particular, which is to some extent liable to be related to what you're used to, what your background is, where you're coming from. Natural inclusion, to my mind, the basic organizational principle of the reality of our experience. So it is that fundamental. It is indeed what holds everything together and enables us to understand the fact that we're all different is what we have in common. Nearly everybody misses out one aspect or another of natural inclusion when they're speaking. And I think this is a human trait. We have these different kinds of perception that are available to us. Scientists are used to objective perception. Artists are used to subjective perception. Some of us like to focus on a particular angle of view, a particular issue, so we think analytically. Others of us think or tend to think intuitively. One of my favorite sort of comparisons is between swans and hawks, and to ask the question, how would you feel if you had eyes on the side of your head? Essentially, how would you experience your own reality and the reality in which you occur if you had eyes on the side of your head as distinct from eyes on the front of your faces? Because as primates, we have eyes on the front of our faces. We have very, very powerful frontal hemispheres of the brain. We have left and right hemispheres of the brain, but they are intercommunicated by the corpus callosum. So it is about, actually natural inclusion is about bringing both our ability to focus together with our ability to circumspect. And it is actually combines the subject and the subjective and the objective in a way that enables us to have, to my mind, a truly comprehensive view of reality and our place within it. I don't see it as all about interconnectedness. It goes deeper than interconnectedness. It's most fundamentally about continuity, natural continuity. And if you substitute the word continuity for connectedness, you'll arrive at this more comprehensive view, and you'll understand that connect is an aspect or something that can happen. Essentially, connectedness for me means physical linkage. But in the sense of it is a way of understanding the relationships, between all. So essentially, it really is about relationships. And most particularly, it's about two aspects of relationship. And any of us who've been in love will know what this means. We have a receptive aspect, which we feel in our hearts. And we have a responsive aspect, which leads us to want to embrace. And it is that sort of combination of the receptive and the responsive that is so important. And we can find that receptive, responsive relationship at all scales of organization, from subatomic to galactic. So it really is that general, that comprehensive, that fundamental. I wrote a little piece this morning and posted it on LinkedIn. It's called Three-Aspect Reality. And you might notice I'm trying to go beyond dualism and beyond monism as philosophical points of view. And it's essentially about the natural inclusion of each aspect within the other. Void, energy, material, soul, spirit, flesh. Eternal, temporal, contemporary. Receptive, responsive, relational. Stillness, circulation, fluidity. Frictionless, informative, resistive. Feminine, masculine, hermaphrodite, omnipresent, current, occurrence, agape, eros, philia, darkness, light, manifestation, gravity, radiance, mass, space, time, place, time, everywhere, local, locality, love, life, love, in love, which is why to exclude one aspect or another, one way or another, as not physically real, objectively, subjectively, mathematically, scientifically, religiously, linguistically, politically, educationally, brings paradox and enmity and psychological, social, and environmental harm. Whereas to include each in the other makes natural sense, consistent with evidence from our actual experience. So what's not to love? It really is that fundamental organizational principle. And it's this relation, it is, as Julia said, the recognition of space as a presence of absence, not an absence of presence. It is switching from what space is what separates to space as what attracts. And likewise, it's about understanding boundaries, natural boundaries, as what dynamically distinguish, not what define, not what separate. So it's really about making distinctions, but not separating. Poets, I think, or many poets have always understood this in various ways. One of my favorite quotes is from William Wordsworth, who said, in nature, everything is distinct, yet nothing defined into absolute, independent singleness. He was recognizing that our tendency as human beings to try to impose definition upon the flow that cannot be defined gets us into trouble time and time again. And it mars our understanding of science, of mathematics, just about everything. So that's just how sort of huge in terms of implications natural inclusion is. At the heart of it is very simple, ridiculously simple. It basically, the dynamic inclusion of immaterial space in material form and vice versa. I can summarize it that quickly. The dynamic inclusion of immaterial space in material form and vice versa. Note the word dynamic, because that's where energy comes in. And of course, it is also where time comes in. So if you try to eliminate any of these things, you're in dead trouble, and nearly everyone does. Even Einstein did. In splitting space-time from energy mass, he created a false dichotomy. Of course, that contrasts with another kind of false dichotomy, which quantum mechanics is based upon. So it is that far-reaching. But at the heart of it, for our human being, when we understand natural inclusion, we recognize those three most fundamental virtues. Honesty, that's authenticity, of course. Reasonability, making good sense. Kindness. Or in another famous phrasing, faith, hope, love. Yeah. So essentially, that's just how huge it is. It's very easy for us as human beings to get distracted from that. Including me, I have my own huge difficulties psychologically in lots of ways. But for me, this is what helps to resolve so much and enables us to love one another and to essentially love our neighbors and neighborhood as we love ourselves, not instead of loving ourselves, but as we love ourselves. I hope I've brought all your different angles of view together, father, mother, and offspring, and essentially recognizing the femininity of the receptive and the responsiveness of the masculine. So actually the two together are co-creative. If you like, it's also the relationship between darkness and light. So much of our human angst comes from fear of darkness. Well, if you understand that darkness is actually a source of love, it's essentially what pulls all together and which light responds to. One of my pieces of writing was based on playing on the language of Genesis. I said, in the beginning was the void, and the void was good. She said, let there be light, and there was light, and the two made love. Dynamic inclusion of space and form, natural inclusion is a process. And it is an evolutionary process, and it is an evolutionary principle. So it is about how these two aspects of reality combine to create diversity. If the energy and the space together co-create material form in myriad forms. It is about that, and it gives us a way of understanding the origins of diversity, both biologically and cosmologically. Right at the heart of it is the notion there is, in effect, no stasis. Many of our ways of thinking are about trying to freeze frame reality. Mm-hmm. But you can't freeze frame reality. So it's almost as though much of our methodology, if you look at the wrong kind of calculus, for example, or using a series of freeze frames and then putting them all together to give it the illusion of movement. Is this, in a sense, it's that freeze framing of reality that catches us out, because reality is continuously changing. And that's one of the aspects of natural continuity, the spatial aspect, which is continuous, and there's the energetic aspect, which is continuous, and the two together combine to produce this amazing diversity of natural flow form. We're all flow forms. We're all expressions of flow. I feel natural inclusion, and I can't help but express it as a circulation of energy, yes, around a receptive center, okay? And it's manifest in whirlpools, tornadoes, hurricanes. All of those things are manifestations of that receptive, responsive relationship between the spatial, which is zero pressure, and energetic, which is pressure. And essentially, it is like understanding weather systems. It really is. It's no coincidence that no one can predict the weather, because essentially the nature of weather is ultimately, indefinable as such. If you can try to freeze frame it and predict it in the short term, you can't predict it in the long term, which is one of the origins of chaos theory. But chaos theory is also a bit wrong because it's got the wrong maths. Evolution is cumulative learning. Yeah. And it's learning as we go. That's exactly right. Resonance is a very interesting idea because you're looking at consonance and dissonance. If you happen to be on the same wavelength, then you have consonance. It relates to music as well, very strongly. I'm just doing a painting at the moment which relates the idea of music to this receptive, responsive relationship between space and energy. And it creates music. Doesn't create randomness. I had this idea of the Polymath circle as the natural community choir. I sort of, it's polyphonic, bringing together diversity of voices, but that diversity of voices produce this flow, which is a combination of consonance and dissonance. It's not a cacophony. This is where the aesthetic comes in. Natural inclusion is both about ethics and it's also about aesthetics and the sense. And I can't help doing this all the time, Pat. It's me feeling it, and I'm feeling it there. I always feel it here. It's not a cognitive thing. It's a heartfelt thing. But the cognitive can make sense of the heartfelt. That's really quite important. But yes, the natural community choir. And I don't like to talk about unity either. I like to talk about community. And politically, I would call myself a communitarian. And I have a view of democracy which no politicians currently do, which is why we're in such a dreadful political mess, because when we try to impose a binary, then we just create opposition and conflict. We don't produce a true democracy, which is for all, through all. Okay, each contributing their different angles without this enmity occurring, which always arises as soon as you've missed out one of the three aspects. Mm-hmm. I think treating dark and light as in opposition to one another, well, it's actually at the root of all sorts of false dichotomy and things that are wrong in the world currently in terms of racism and all sorts of things. This is one of my favorite poems about natural inclusion. What may not be obvious, everybody is a cavity at heart. Every figure reconfigures both in science and in art. Every face is interfacing from no bottom to no top. Every faith is interfaith that cannot tell us where to stop. Every lining opens inwards as it brings its inside out. Every curtain closes outwards to conceal its inner doubt. Every story ends in opening from some future into past. Every glory is the story of finding first in last. Every aching is the making of another role for play. Every taking is the slaking of another's thirst to stay. Every tidings no confiding without the trust to tell. Every siding is no hiding from the fear of utter hell. Every flowing is the ebbing of another's world within. Every glowing is the lighting of the darkness in the spin. Every heartbeat is the murmur in the core of inner space. Every drumbeat is the echo of the dance within each place. Every silence is the gathering of the storm that is to come when love comes to life. Ooh. It is the aesthetic and this sense, as I say, of feeling it in the heart. If you actually try to draw a circle with a compass on a piece of paper, you've got a compass point, you've got a circulating pencil. Can you not? I always used to find that even as I was doing that, I would feel it here. And it's a demonstration of what I call the whole point without a W. Okay, this is the whole point of natural inclusion, is that there are no holes with a W in nature. There is no such thing as definitive completeness. And that's because we have space as a receptive presence everywhere, infinite. And we have natural boundaries as energetic, dynamically informative, which relates to your importance of information, but understanding information as fundamentally energetic. It's a process in information, okay? So it is that when I'm doing that, I am informing a vortex. So that's the aesthetic. And this is what I feel when I do my paintings. All of my paintings are about this aesthetic and recognizing it and feeling it. And the poems too. True democracy, as I understand it, is about everyone having a say. It's certainly not about majority dominance. The best examples of democratic systems are the sharing circles, or indigenous sharing circles, in which you have a circle of elders, each of whose responsibility is to bring a different angle of view to arrive at an overall more comprehensive understanding of your actual situation. An aspect of reality has gone missing. And that's what happens a great deal in current science, is that current science, especially based on objective methodology, which excludes the intangible aspect of reality, the immeasurable. So you'll end up with very peculiar ideas if you exclude the intangible, the immeasurable, the non-quantifiable. The only quantifiable presence is material. And ultimately, if you keep cutting material down, you end up with an aspect of material that isn't quantifiable. Right at the heart, I think it is overwhelming. It overwhelmed me when I first started thinking about it, because I could just see its relevance to absolutely everything. But at the heart of it is stay with the simplicity. I'd say to anyone, stay with the simplicity. And the simplicity is the dynamic inclusion of immaterial space in material form, and vice versa. You hold on to that, you start from there, and all starts to fall into place. You can relate that very basic, as I say, the fundamental organizational principle of reality itself. You can relate that basic principle to all aspects of human endeavor, human experience. And that is overwhelming, of course, to actually, it boggles the mind to recognize that that is the case. And not only does it boggle the mind to realize that's the case, but to realize that we've been missing the point as human beings for thousands of years. It's each and the other. The dynamic aspect and the spatial aspect, the stillness and the motion co-create reality. So it's each in the other, it's not one or the other. It's not either inclusion or exclusion. That's a product of definitive logic, which is right at the heart of current mathematical physics, which is why current mathematical physics is in a mess. Essentially, underlying mechanical action and reaction is immaterial receptivity and response. So essentially natural inclusion is what underlies more deeply the superficial expression of mechanical action and reaction. There are no definitive boundaries. Boundaries do not cut space. You cannot cut space, and you can't cut time either. You can cut material.